OpenAI charges $10 per million input tokens. A fine-tuned open-source model on your own server? $0.004 per million. That's a 2,500x cost difference. Okay, wait, hold on. In early 2026, the open-source version is straight up winning on the benchmarks that matter. Like, your GPU just became a billionaire. Okay, so here's what's wild. A year ago, open-source AI was the thing you used when you couldn't afford the real stuff. You'd run Llama on your laptop, it'd hallucinate like it had a fever dream after too much Red Bull, and you'd quietly slink back to paying OpenAI. That was the deal. Deadpan. But something shifted. And I don't mean gradually, I mean the floor fell out from under the proprietary model argument overnight. Like Wile E. Coyote realizing there's no ground. IBM's survey from Q4 2025 found that 67% of C-suite executives now cite data privacy and IP control as their primary reason for choosing open source over cloud APIs. Not cost. Control. And a Deloitte survey from January 2026 found that 48% of enterprises in regulated industries are actively prioritizing open source, specifically because of auditability requirements under the EU AI Act, which started enforcement in Q2 2026. So this isn't hobbyist territory anymore. This is enterprise standard. And if you're still treating open source as the budget option, you're misreading what's actually happening. No, but seriously, wake up. But here's what I want to flag before we go any further, and this is important. Open source being better doesn't mean open source is always cheaper. Those are two completely different things. We'll get to the actual math in a bit, because the real answer might surprise you. Or make you cry. One of those. The LMSYS Chatbot Arena leaderboard, which is basically the ELO rating system for AI models, like chess rankings but nerdier and with more GPU bills, showed in a February 2026 snapshot that a fine-tuned Llama 3.5 ADB model specialized on medical Q&A outperforms GPT-4 Turbo by 7.1% on domain-specific benchmarks. 7.1% on a task that actually matters. That's wild. And on vision? LLaVA-Next 13B hit 92.3% accuracy on the VQA V2 benchmark, according to the HuggingFace OpenVQA leaderboard from January 2026. The gap to Gemini Pro Vision? Under 3%. A 13 billion parameter model which you can run on a decent laptop, closing to within 3% of Google's flagship Vision model. I'm not even kidding. My laptop just got a participation trophy. HuggingFace published data showing over 30,000 new fine-tuned models were uploaded in Q4 2025 alone. The proprietary labs literally cannot iterate that fast. They're a restaurant kitchen trying to keep up with the entire internet making food at home. Fast, efficient, and now with way more burnt toast. Alright, 7 tools. Here we go. Tool 1 is Llama 3.5 ADB as your base model. But the key word is base. Because the raw model isn't the point. The point is what you do to it. Fine-tuning a large language model used to feel like a ritual that required a data center, 3 ML engineers, and a small prayer. You'd need distributed training across multiple A100s. It'd take days, and the cost was measured in hundreds of dollars minimum. I did it once. Felt like sacrificing a goat to the CUDA gods. Not anymore. And that's because of Tool 7, which I'll get to. But here's the preview. You can now fine-tune an 80 billion parameter model on a single consumer RTX 4090. Hours, not days. Tens of dollars, not hundreds. The analogy that actually fits here? Fine-tuning is like taking a surgeon who already has a medical degree and making them a cardiac specialist. Except now it's on your gaming rig and your frame rates might drop a bit. Tool 2. You've got your fine-tuned model. Now you need to serve it at scale without your server catching fire. Literally. vLLM is an inference optimization framework. Open source, free, and genuinely impressive. Through optimized KV caching and continuous batching, it reduces inference latency by 10 to 40% compared to naive deployment. The GitHub repo has the benchmarks if you want to go deep. I spent 3 hours reading the docs like a masochist. This is where your cost math compounds. You're already at 0.004 per million tokens instead of $10. Now you're also serving those tokens 30% faster. At 100 million requests a month, that efficiency starts to look like a real competitive advantage. Or a cheat code. Okay, wait, I need to be honest with you for a second, because I've been making this sound very clean. A few months back, I tried deploying an open source model for a pretty low volume internal task. Nothing fancy. Total infrastructure cost $300 a month. The proprietary API for the same task would have been $50. Open source is free in the same way a rescue dog is free. Zero upfront cost. But you are about to invest significantly in training, feeding, maintenance, and a surprising amount of emotional support at 2 a.m. when your deployment breaks. Deadpan. My model ghosted me once. The math only flips at scale. Under 10 million tokens a month? Honestly, a managed API is probably cheaper when you factor in DevOps time. Over 100 million? The 2,500x cost reduction becomes your moat. That's the actual decision framework, and we'll build it out fully in a bit. Tool 3. This one solves a different problem. Your fine-tuned model is good, but it still doesn't know what's in your company's internal documents. It doesn't know your Q4 financials, your legal contracts, your proprietary research. And if you ask it, it will answer anyway, confidently, fluently, and completely wrong. Using a generic LLM on your company's specific data is like asking a very well-read but slightly tipsy historian to recite your quarterly earnings. They'll sound authoritative. Half of it will be brilliant nonsense. The other half? Pure vibes. This is where LlamaIndex and ChromaDB come in as a RAG stack. Retrieval Augmented Generation. LlamaIndex indexes your documents. ChromaDB stores the vector embeddings. When your model needs to answer a question, it first retrieves the relevant context from your actual data, then generates a response grounded in that. It goes from confident hallucination to actual answers. And it's completely open source. Free to run, free to modify, and your data never touches a third-party API. But your RAG stack is only as good as your embeddings. If the embedding model doesn't understand your domain, your retrieval is garbage, and your answers are garbage. Tool 4. Sentence Transformers. Open source, with models hitting 92% plus on semantic similarity benchmarks. And you can fine-tune them on your own data. Legal contracts, medical records, technical documentation, for near zero additional cost. This is the part nobody talks about. Everyone focuses on the LLM, but the embedding model is the index to your library. A bad index means your librarian can't find anything. A good one means every query lands exactly where it should. Who even reads the index? Apparently now we do. Tool 5. Vision. LLaVA-Next 13b. I mentioned the benchmark earlier. 92.3% on VQA v2, under 3% gap to Gemini Pro Vision as of the January 2026 HuggingFace leaderboard update. For medical imaging analysis, legal document scanning, visual Q&A, this is production ready. Right now. On hardware you probably already own. That's insane. 3 months ago, I would have told you that vision was the one area where you still needed a proprietary model. I would have been wrong. Call back to my laptop trophy. Tool 6 is maybe the least flashy, but honestly the most important for most people watching this. Ollama. One command local deployment for basically any open source model. Pull the model, run it, you've got a local API endpoint. No Docker configuration, no CUDA wrestling, no 3-hour setup where you realize you installed the wrong version of PyTorch and now nothing works. I spent an embarrassing amount of time fighting CUDA errors last year, so you don't have to. Self-deprecation level, expert. Ollama makes local AI about as complicated as installing an app. That's not nothing. That's the difference between open source being accessible and open source being a weekend project that never finishes. Like my half-built IKEA shelf. Tool 7. The fine-tuning stack that makes everything else possible. Axolotl handles configuration-driven fine-tuning. You define your setup in a YAML file, it handles the rest. Unsloth, which released v0.12 in January 2026, gives you a 4x speed improvement over traditional PyTorch FSTP methods. Together, you're fine-tuning an ADB model in hours on a single RTX 490. Cost $50 to $200 depending on your dataset size. According to Unsloth's official January 2026 blog post, this isn't theoretical. It's been validated on consumer hardware. The era where fine-tuning required a cloud cluster is just over. Gone. Okay, here's where I give proprietary models their due, because I'm not trying to sell you something. There are 3 scenarios where you should still be paying. 1, you need a 99.99% uptime SLA with legal indemnification. OpenAI and Anthropic provide that. Your self-hosted stack doesn't, unless you've built serious infrastructure around it. 2, you're doing extremely high-stakes generalized reasoning, the kind where you genuinely need the best possible model on a task that can't be specialized. GPT-4 Turbo and Claude still have an edge on raw general reasoning at the highest tier. 3, you have no DevOps resources. If your team is 2 people and neither of them wants to manage infrastructure, a managed API is the right call. The math is different when the alternative is distraction from your actual product. You're not paying for the model. You're paying for the infrastructure, the SLA, and the liability. That's a legitimate purchase for the right context. Sarcasm level, 0. All right, here's the actual decision tree. Print this out, tattoo it somewhere. Do you need auditability or IP control? Open source wins, full stop. The EU AI Act makes this non-negotiable for regulated industries. Are you running under 10 million tokens a month? Proprietary API is probably cheaper when you factor in DevOps. Over 100 million tokens a month? Open source at 2,500x cost reduction is your competitive moat. Is your task specialized? Medical, legal, domain-specific code? Fine-tuned open source wins on benchmarks. Do you need 99.99% uptime with 0 infrastructure management? Pay for the managed service. Do you have ML engineering resources? Open source scales. Otherwise, start with APIs and migrate when the math makes sense. The best AI model isn't the one with the highest overall benchmark score. It's the one that solves your specific problem most efficiently. That answer changes by use case. Anyone telling you there's a universal winner is selling something, probably NFTs. Zoom out for a second, because this isn't just about developer costs. Healthcare organizations are deploying auditable open source models for clinical decision support, because you cannot put patient data through a third-party API and meet HIPAA requirements. Finance is doing the same for compliance reasons. Smaller AI companies are now competing directly with larger ones because specialization has replaced scale as the key differentiator. 30,000 fine-tuned models in 1 quarter. The pace of specialization in open source has no equivalent in the proprietary world. The labs release a new model every few months. The community ships 30,000 variations in the same window. This is a structural shift, not a trend. The question isn't whether open source AI matters. It's whether you're positioned to use it before your competitors are. Don't be the blockbuster in this story. If you're building AI products in 2026 and you haven't seriously evaluated these 7 tools against your current stack, Llama for your base, vLLM for inference, LlamaIndex and ChromaDB for grounding, sentence transformers for embeddings, LLaVA-Next for vision, Ollama for local deployment, Axolotl and Unsloth for fine-tuning, you're not just leaving money on the table. You're letting someone else build the specialized version of your product before you do. Subscribe to Nuvox AI if you want this kind of breakdown every day. We cover what's actually moving in AI. Benchmarks, tools, real cost analysis, no hype. Open source AI isn't catching up anymore. It's already here. The only question is whether you're using it.